After years and years of teasing, Kill Bill The Whole Bloody Affair, a 4.5-hour cut incorporating Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, along with new footage and a new animated segment, has finally seen release to select theaters worldwide. I had a chance to see it this weekend, and I had a blast. It was 4.5 hours well spent. Because of this release, Tarantino has been in the press a lot lately. Recently, he shared his list of top 20 movies of the century so far. Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down took the number 1 spot, by the way. And he's also taken a lot of flack for putting down the actor Paul Dano. Love him or hate him, the man lives and breathes all things film, and maybe the one thing he loves more than making films is talking about them. I thought I'd commemorate the release of the Kill Bill epic in my own way, and cover what Quentin Tarantino has had to say about the Alien series over the years. He's had a lot to say, in particular of the first 2 films, and I thought it might be fun to share. I'll be pulling transcripts, quotes from interviews, and paraphrasing throughout, but of course, Tarantino has a very particular way of talking. So maybe it will sound like I'm trying to do a very bad Tarantino impression, because when you read his words out loud, it almost inevitably sounds like that. But I assure you that's not the case, just a little disclaimer. So let's take a look, first and foremost, of what he said of Ridley Scott's film, the original 1979 Alien. In 2020, W Magazine published an article focusing specifically on Quentin Tarantino's favorite films from 1979. The list was in no particular order, but included films such as Apocalypse Now, Rocky II, All That Jazz, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and Walter Hill's The Warriors. Of Alien, he said, "Alien was one of the events of the year. It holds up to this day as well." Not too in-depth in this article, but this list is actually compiled from a 2-part podcast episode of W's 5 Things with Lynn Hirschberg, spanning a little more than 2 hours in length. The podcast's focus wasn't a list of his favorite movies of 1979, mind you. It was quite literally Quentin Tarantino going through every single movie he went to a movie theater, paid for, and watched in the year 1979. The list for the article filtered out his mentions to compile their list and lifted these blurbs. They developed the list purely based on what he had to say about each movie, picking the 20 that he seemed to like the most based on what he had to say, thus no particular order. It is worth noting, though, that Tarantino intentionally stops to mention at one point that Alien is one of the films from the list that he holds in an especially high regard. Also keep in mind, if this is 1979, then Tarantino would be about 16 years old at this point. He's just a fresh-eyed film aficionado with probably a lot of free time and expendable income, catching whatever movies he could. Not for any other specific reason that he loves to watch movies. I think his famous quote is, "I didn't go to film school, I went to the movies." Also keeping in mind, this is 1979, this is before multiplexes, this is when theaters could only show a certain movie a certain number of times in a day. Back then, when they said a movie was a blockbuster, they meant it. Lines would go down the block. And Alien was certainly one of those movies. So there's no choice from several showings throughout the week. If it's playing a certain day and you want to see the movie, you better get your ass down there and see it. No assigned seats, no buffer room. It's likely a full house and you're elbow to elbow with everyone else sharing in that cinematic experience. So you can imagine the teenage Tarantino in the dark experiencing Alien for the first time with this huge audience, feeling the tension build with each passing moment. Not that I want to speak for him, but Alien was just that kind of movie. He would go into further detail about Alien in a different podcast, Eli Roth's History of Horror Uncut, Season 1, Episode 3. This was another 2 hours of Tarantino talking about movies, and the obvious focus here was horror movies. Eventually, the conversation leaned into Roger Corman's production company, New World Pictures, and all of the rip-off movies they made. Tarantino stated that the Alien ripoff is a genre unto itself, which rings fairly true. In his discussion of Alien, Tarantino expresses his admiration for the film, also echoing that it was a highlight from 1979 for him, but also gets into some lesser-known stories of its pre-production. Here's what he had to say. Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett wrote Alien to get a movie going with Roger Corman. They wrote their version of what they thought a good New World picture would be that could be doable. Okay, it's all in a spaceship and da-da-da-da-da. And so they get it to Corman's people, and they read it, and they're interested. But they're not, snapping it up right away, alright? They're still thinking about it. And somehow David Giler and Walter Hill get it. And they read it, and they go, "This script isn't really very good, but it's got a great idea, and it's got a great premise. I think we could do this as a big movie. We could really do it classy. And so they got in on it. I think they made the script a lot better. They added the entire class consciousness. Well, they made Ripley a female, and they are the ones that added the whole class system between the ship. Walter Hill told me that part of the reason that they were even going to do Alien is Fox had a setup at Pinewood Studios, because they had done Star Wars there, and they had just done Empire Strikes Back. So they had this whole apparatus ready to go at Pinewood Studios where people knew effects. The reason we're going to do it, because we have all that setup there. So Walter Hill has decided, I don't want to direct it because I don't know enough about special effects, but I'll, godfather it. They offered it to all these people. They all turned him down. They offered it to one director after another. Each director kept turning them down. Walter Hill talks about, we offered it to Jack Gold. Now, Jack Gold is actually a good director. Jack Gold is famous for, he's a British TV movie director. Most of his movies are really classy British TV movies. Jack Gold turned him down. And Walter Hill's like, okay, when you've got a greenlit Go film from 20th Century Fox and Jack Gold's turning you down, alright? You know you got a problem. And so they offered it to Robert Aldrich, and Aldrich said, yes, come meet me. So Giler and Walter Hill go to meet Robert Aldrich, and Aldrich is like a big burly guy, and he's like, so why aren't you doing it if it's so damn good? Well, I don't feel comfortable enough with special effects and that stuff. I don't feel comfortable enough dealing in that world. Okay, I guess I can understand that. I don't have any problem with that. Well, I think you got a terrific picture here. I think, look, I agree. The story is very interesting. Story's great. You got a good movie. We could scare the hell out of audiences with this. It's a great setup, great story. What are we gonna do about this damn alien, though? That's what I gotta say. I don't want a guy in a suit. I don't want a guy in a suit. I don't want that. Now, it's impossible to contemplate Alien without taking H.R. Giger into effect and his concept of the creature. But you have to put yourself in a world where that hasn't happened yet. H.R. Giger has not been hired. There is no drawings of the alien. They literally are figuring it out. And naturally, they come to the idea of a man in a suit, and they go, oh, that's horrible. We can't do that. Aldrich had an interesting idea. It sounds preposterous, but I don't know what that would look like. His idea was, and he was just spitballing, but the idea was something weird. What if we took an orangutan and shaved it? And we shoot inserts of him, and then that is the alien. Do you know what an orangutan without hair looks like? I don't. So leave it to Quentin Tarantino to veer this conversation about Alien to a story about a shaved simian. This, as he notes, is a second-hand story. This is something Walter Hill told him. Nevertheless, you're not going to hear a story like that on any of the Alien documentaries or books. It's a purely personal kind of anecdote. Very amusing, and a nice peek into the early development of the beloved classic. While Tarantino has spoken highly of the first film, he has even more to say of the James Cameron sequel, and possibly holds it in an even higher regard. In 2021, for a very special Celebration of Cinema episode of the Empire podcast, Tarantino joined filmmaker Edgar Wright to share memorable cinematic experiences. The focus here was to discuss some of the best times these filmmakers have had as audience members during film screenings. Tarantino went straight into Aliens. This is what he had to say. Well, I was thinking a lot about it coming up for this, and I'd like us to get into kind of the minutiae of how different some of these things can be when you mention audience reaction. People normally think of, like, the stand-up and cheer moments when you're rooting for, like, in a football game or something, or they think of the comedy moments where the audience is laughing hysterically in unison, and I think that's what most people think about when they think of these collective moments. But I think there's even more that I think there's more nuance than just these moments to talk about as we go on. When it comes to that collective moment, having with strangers and an audience, that's probably one of my favorite things in the world. I mean, probably over 200 times have I had that kind of experience. In a movie theater with an audience, and probably about 50 times. It was special, unique, would make a great story. I could tell you all 50 of them. Just choose the 50 and they would all make the points and they would all be a good little story. So I was trying to think about which ones I wanted to talk about. And at first, keep it about the raucous cheering aspect. The first one was in the 80s with a group of guys that I worked at Video Archives with, just seeing Aliens the day it opened at the AFCO Embassy Cinema in Westwood. There was like 4 factors that made that really special. 1, it's James Cameron's follow-up to The Terminator. Now, when you saw The Terminator was a complete surprise. When you were sitting in the movie theater on the day that opened, or the night that opened, you couldn't believe that an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie could be that good. You were just gobsmacked. Now this is him following it up, and directors are usually really not that great at following up. That first movie takes you by surprise, so there's that. He's going to follow it up. Also, it's a sequel to a great movie, Alien, and a true sequel. It's not part of a well-thought-out artistic trilogy. It's a true sequel. 3, the critical response was over the top. The fourth aspect of it, which the other 3 aspects plugged into, was the audience anticipation of what you were going to see was through the roof. Because it is a sequel, we had an idea of what we were going to see. It's not Terminator. It's taking us by surprise. Even Raiders of the Lost Ark took you by surprise when you saw it on that opening Friday. The Matrix took you by surprise. Die Hard took you by surprise. No, we know the alien. We get it. We know the mythology. It's not like we had to stand in line for 2 different screenings before our screening. We had tickets, I think, to the 4:30 in the afternoon screening on Friday. But the line is going all the way down to Wilshire Boulevard, and then it snakes around to Westwood Boulevard. It goes past the parking lot where you park your cars. It's like a human centipede is just like snaking all through the Westwood Village. You're standing there for like 90 minutes. You're in this line 90 minutes before they let you in, and it's opening night. It's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and everybody's so excited. Not only that, James Cameron's there. And when I say he's there, he's not doing a Q&A, he's not making a special appearance, he's not talking to the audience. No, this is his big night. This is the opening of his movie that he's killed himself for. He's stage managing the theatrical experience in the Premier Cinema in Los Angeles. He's there making sure they're treating people well in line. He's making sure that the projection is right on. He's making sure that the speakers are working right. The sound level. He's stressing. It's like a market research screening. He's stressing, making sure that everything's right. Then we're led into the theater. Jam-packed, asphalt at elbows. Then the movie starts and it starts playing. After saying those 4 aspects that made the movie's anticipation for the movie so exciting, the movie did the impossible. It exceeded our expectations. It was better than the critics said. They didn't have a fucking clue. It was better than we could have hoped for. It was better than any sequel we had ever seen. It was one of the great popcorn movie experiences we had ever had, and by that time I had a lot of really great popcorn movie experiences. But the moment in the movie during the screening that was the most wow moment, it's not when she gets in the Transformer forklift thing. It's not when she gets in the power loader, because by that point you don't think Ripley's going to die at that point. It's the end. She's going to beat up the air. You're kind of home free by that moment in time. She's not going to die at that point. It's WrestleMania time by that point. But when her and Newt are in that little isolation chamber and the facehugger is in there with them, the whole rest of the movie had been exciting. But for the first time, I wouldn't say it's terrifying, because terrifying is too strong a word. That's a very special thing in cinema, but it was scary as shit. It was really, really scary, and the audience was flipping out. And then when Reese shows up and blasts through the window and jumps through and goes through the window to save her, the audience went berserk. It was like they didn't think I'm going to jump up in the air now and pump my fist. They were propelled out of their seats because they were so relieved. It was just, to me, that was the high point of the concert, of a perfect concert. That was the high point of it. That's opening night of Aliens with a phenomena. You had to be there. One note here that you may have noticed, that Quentin Tarantino mistakenly refers to Hicks as Reese. Kyle Reese being Michael Bihn's character from The Terminator, not Aliens. An easy enough mistake to make in the moment, but in case you were curious, yes, Edgar Wright does make a point to call him out on it. So there's that. Maybe you hold Quentin Tarantino's opinions on a pedestal, maybe not, but this is a pretty incredible story, and the praise comes from a high place. Tarantino knows his movies. People want to hear him talk about movies. They're always eager to hear his opinions. The very fact that when he does talk about films or actors, it actually makes the rounds in news stories kind of speaks for itself, for better or worse. So the fact that this film guru holds his experience in watching Aliens for the first time as one of his most cherished film-going experiences should be a point of pride for fans of the film. It really makes you feel seen, doesn't it? It really speaks to the quality of Cameron's sequel and just how effectively he's able to get reactions out of the audience and how involved they can become. I wasn't yet on this earth when Aliens was released, so I can live vicariously through this experience Tarantino has shared, and it actually kind of warms my heart. It must have been really something to be right there on the front line and it is something unique that only a specific amount of people at a specific point in time were able to share. But QT's Alien Love Fest didn't stop there. He would go on to recount a version of the same story years later with Far Out magazine. The article's title, The Sci-Fi Movie That Blew Quentin Tarantino's Mind. Oh my god. The article is accompanied by an audio interview where he has posed a similar question to the Empire podcast. Are there any special cinematic moments from your world that really stand out? Maybe the first time you went, possibly with somebody, or a particular film you saw that really kind of inspired and lit the fire inside you as a filmmaker? Tarantino snaps immediately into his response. I'll go with the first thing that came into my mind, and that was going to the AFCO Cinema in Westwood and seeing Aliens the day it opened, the Friday it opened. Tarantino recalls once again the long lines and James Cameron being there and adds some more of his opinion on the film. It was one of those things where you have a situation where a lot of movies are built up and everything. This couldn't be built up more and it couldn't deliver more. I just remember having this thought process in watching the movie. Oh my god. This movie we were expecting so much and it's giving us more. This is as good an experience as an action movie as you can ever have in a theater. Again, this sounds just like an amazing experience, and I'm hugely envious of anyone who had the chance to see Aliens this way, or in a similar way. I've seen it play in theaters a few times before, and the audience was always pretty good, and it was always pretty packed, but it's one thing to have that, and an entirely different thing to be there on its opening night, completely sold out, audience going wild. I can only really imagine something like that, and not just the big moments like you may expect, like the power loader as Tarantino mentions, and the facehugger scene, but I can just imagine how audiences at the time must have reacted to the Hudson character, who was so crucial in letting off a little bit of tension and acting as the voice for the audience. Imagine what the reaction would have been for audiences hearing, "Game over, man," for the very first time. Or, "Yeah, man, Bishop should go. Good idea." It must have played so well. Hearing about this experience and thinking about how it must have been really just makes me want to drop everything and watch Aliens right now. Is that just me? It's a crowd pleaser, no doubt, which is more than can be said of the third film. At this point, you may wonder, with the praise he's given the first two, how does Quentin Tarantino feel about Alien 3, and what has he had to say about it? This is where things get pretty divisive for fans. A lot of people who hold James Cameron's film in high regard just can't really forgive how the characters Hicks and Newt were discarded. As someone who loves Alien 3 myself, I won't turn my nose up to something like that. I do feel it's valid. But surely Tarantino is an admirer of David Fincher's work. His 2007 film Zodiac also made it to Tarantino's list of best films of the last 25 years. Not to mention their contemporaries, both coming onto the scene at almost the same time. Fincher's debut, Alien 3, was released just a few months before Tarantino's debut, Reservoir Dogs, saw a wide release. So that video store clerk who went with his friends to see Aliens in 1986 was long gone by the time Alien 3 came out. Tarantino was a filmmaker himself at that point. He'd got his hands dirty, and perhaps had some empathy and insight into the cross Fincher had to bear with the film's very public production problems. Tarantino has spoken briefly about Alien 3, but doesn't go into any of that, but does bring up an issue he has with the film. This all came, of all places, from a DVD commentary track. In the mid-2000s, Edgar Wright's television series Spaced came to DVD, and during that glorious time for physical media, even a cult TV show could get some serious bells and whistles. The success and acclaim for Shaun of the Dead didn't hurt bringing up Spaced's status either. Tarantino joined Wright on a commentary track for one of the series' 2 episodes, and I guess when the two get together, the Alien series inevitably comes up. They began by talking about disappointing sequels, such as the recent, at the time, Matrix sequels, and George Lucas's Star Wars prequel trilogy. Wright brought up the belief that a bad sequel can retroactively bring down appreciation for the movie or movies that came before it, and he cites Alien 3 as a perfect example. Edgar Wright definitely seems to be in the group that believes that the killing of Hicks and Newt somehow invalidated the incredible struggle the Ripley character went through in Aliens. Tarantino was not in agreement. Here's what he had to say. I have to say I can make an argument for Alien 3. I mean, I kind of like Alien 3. I can go for killing Hicks and Newt. I can go for that. I liked the prison. I liked the bald head. The only thing I didn't like about it was when they brought Lance Henriksen at the end. It seemed like this... what is this weird, cheap kind of in this gigantic, expensive movie. There's this cheap gimmick happening at the last second, but I always thought that the movie was better than people give it credit for. So there you have it, Alien 3 fans. Quentin Tarantino is one of us. He's a believer. Although I don't really agree with that criticism of bringing in Lance Henriksen, aka Bishop 2, at the end. I actually think it's one of the film's most inspired elements, and it makes the ending so much stronger. But this is where we hit a little bit of a dry patch in Tarantino's opinions on the Alien series. I haven't seen anything publicly said of the fourth film, Alien Resurrection, and as far as I can tell, he hasn't voiced any opinions on the Alien vs. Predator movies either. I'm actually pretty curious to know what he may have thought about the AVP movies, especially the second one. This may be a good time to point out that 2007's Aliens vs. Predator Requiem actually has a connection to, or maybe more accurately, has taken inspiration from, Quentin Tarantino. Although never actually spoken out loud in the film, the filmmakers of AVPR took it upon themselves to name the lead predator Wolf. This is a nod to Winston Wolfe, Harvey Keitel's character in Pulp Fiction. The idea being that, much like Winston Wolfe, this predator is assigned to quickly solve problems and clean up messes. So, in case you didn't know, there's a fun piece of trivia for you. Now, if we're talking about things the other way around, if any of Tarantino's movies contain nods to any of the Alien films, then I think I may have actually found one specifically in Kill Bill: The Whole Bloody Affair. This concerns additional footage not present in Volumes 1 or 2, so if you happen to consider any of that a spoiler, then maybe skip ahead about a minute. But The Whole Bloody Affair contains an extended sequence showing the origins of O-Ren Ishii, played by Lucy Liu. As it stood originally in this animated sequence in Kill Bill Volume 1, O-Ren got revenge on the man who killed her parents, Boss Matsumoto. In an additional scene in The Whole Bloody Affair, she gets revenge on his henchman, Pretty Ricky, who also contributed to her parents' deaths. She's able to track him down, she attacks him in an elevator, fills it with grenades, and escapes into the shaft as the elevator blows up, but he grabs one of her legs. She's finally able to escape when her shoe falls off, and Pretty Ricky loses his grip and finally falls to his death. I couldn't help but notice how similar that was to the ending of Aliens, with Ripley and the Alien Queen. Maybe it's just a coincidence, it's not exactly the most unique occurrence in the world, but if you're like me and you have Aliens and Tarantino on the brain, at least for the sake of this video, then maybe you'll accept it as a nod. Whether Tarantino found AVPR's nod to Pulp Fiction flattering or not, or is even aware of the connection, I guess we may never know because he's never spoken about it. He's also never spoken about Alien Covenant or Alien Romulus, so the most recent comments he's had to make regarding the Alien series relate to Prometheus. In a fairly well-known and well-circulated clip, Tarantino was a guest on Craig Ferguson's late-night talk show, and this just happened to be around the time Prometheus was released. He was asked his opinion on the Ridley Scott prequel, and this is what he had to say. "I loved it, and I was disappointed in it at the same time. On one hand, I was a little disappointed about it. On the other hand, it was actually kind of cool to see such a big deal, serious science fiction epic by a director like Ridley Scott. But there was part of it I actually did like, and overall the experience was really cool having been in it. There was also a lot of dumb stuff in it though. When it got to the point where they're on another planet and then a space cobra literally shows up, opens its hood, and the guy who's in charge of alien creatures goes, 'Hey little fella, how you doing?' It's a space cobra. Any cobra. I don't get into his face." Ah yes, even Quentin Tarantino couldn't overlook Field's stupidity. This is an often cited moment that many critics of the film have used to give the overall impression that the film is full of stupid characters doing stupid things. He doesn't mention it, maybe due to time constraints in a short talk show interview, but maybe he had issues with Vickers running away from the crashing juggernaut in a straight line too. But you could very easily take a look at this clip and his comments about the Space Cobra and run in your own straight line. You could develop a clickbaity headline. Quentin Tarantino blasts Prometheus. It's full of stupid characters doing stupid things. But it's never really always so black and white, is it? In the same breaths, Tarantino expresses love for the film. That it's a big deal science fiction epic, and that's really cool to see and to experience. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned there. Maybe you can take issue with stupid things, but still overall enjoy a movie. Maybe it was Craig Ferguson who actually put it best when responding to Tarantino. You can't really have a science fiction movie without dumb stuff, or else it's not science fiction. I mean, for every Obi-Wan, you gotta have your fucking Jar Jar. And this is where we end the saga of Quentin Tarantino and his comments on the Alien series. As long as the man is still alive and kicking, he'll always be talking about movies, so I hope he may drop some more opinions about the series in the future. I'd love to know what he has to say about Alien Resurrection, the AVP movies, Covenant, and Romulus. I mean, for example, if he felt the way he did about Lance Henriksen showing up at the end of Alien 3, calling it a cheap gimmick. I can only really imagine what he may have had to say upon seeing Alien Romulus and Ian Holm's AI CGI doppelganger. Maybe he'd have some major issues with that, like many did, or maybe not. Tarantino can, at times, be unpredictable with the opinions he unleashes. But maybe he has made comments about Romulus and the other Alien movies, but I just somehow missed them. If that's the case, please let me know in the comments. But I'd like to end things today by asking you a question. On the topic of the Empire podcast, where Tarantino speaks about his cherished movie-going experiences, I'm curious to know if you have your own. Do you have your own memorable moment of going to the movies and having the crowd go wild? Things are a little bit different with movies today, but they can still happen. I have my own experiences. Maybe my own experiences aren't exactly unique. Like, of course, I went to see Avengers Endgame. Practically the entire final 20 minutes was cheering. I thought that was pretty cool. I'll always cherish being able to experience that with a large audience. And to go back further into my youth with kind of a random experience, bizarrely, was back in 2004 when I went to see The Grudge. I'll never forget that. Something was in the air that night. Everybody was so rowdy, treating it like it was a hockey game, not a horror movie. Like when Ted Raimi loses his jaw, we were all in hysterics. I don't know what it was. We were possessed or something. Everyone was emulating that weird noise that the ghost makes, and it was just very bizarre. So unexpected. It's been 20 years now, and I don't think anything could top that. So I'd love to hear some of your experiences. Please comment below and share some cinematic memories. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and please be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the latest from Alien Theory. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Butta, our Wayland-Yutani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. Thank you so very much to Ben Katz, the Patreon Hive's queen. A very special thanks as always goes out to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. You can also follow me on social media. Follow @AlienTheory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow @AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.